Thankfully, there were some presidential contenders on both the Republican and Democratic sides who were willing to stand up for Muslim Americans' right to exist, in reference to what Trump had been saying at his town hall event. And we're going to give credit where credit is due. First, we've got Christie. Here's what he had to say about it.
He's got to decide what he wants to do for himself, but I would just tell you that if somebody at one of my town hall meetings said something like that, I would correct them and say, no, the president's a Christian, and he was born in this country. I mean, I think those two things are self-evident. Donald Trump's got to decide, as we've seen, I've said this all along, he's got to decide how serious a candidate he wants to be, and how he handles different problems like this are going to determine that in the eyes of the American people. I'm not going to lecture him about what to do. I'll just tell you what I would do. And I wouldn't have permitted that. If someone brought that up at a town hall meeting of mine, I would have said, no, listen, before we answer, let's clear some things up for the rest of the audience. And I think you have an obligation as a leader to do that.
Yeah, if it would happen at his town hall, he would correct the person and then give him an egg wash and then deep fry him.
He's right this time. Let's give him a pass.
Come on.
Monday.
I know he's eating this up and all the attention and stuff, but well, I'm one to talk.
Boy, he's got a fire in the belly for this issue, am I right?
Jesus Christ. He's right in this issue. Now, look, I'm not going to give him McCain-level credit because he wasn't actually faced with it. We have to actually see him in the moment respond in the right way. But even being willing to say it, and as we said, could actually hurt him a little bit since his base is a bunch of foaming mouth xenophobes. It is a good thing.
He already hugged a black guy. It's over for him.
He's done.
Those people are gone for him. So I think that's why he does feel okay to push back on Trump on this, because he knows he's lost the racists.
Well, that's good, I think. And if he could actually succeed on that, I think that would be good for both him and for the Republican Party. Now, we do also have Hillary Clinton. She also spoke out on yesterday's event.
He knew, or he should have known, that what that man was asking was not only way out of bounds, it was untrue. And he should have, from the beginning, repudiated that kind of rhetoric, that level of hatefulness in a questioner in an audience that he was appearing before. So I would call on him and call on all of the candidates to stop this descent into the kind of hateful, mean-spirited, divisive rhetoric that we have seen too much of in the last months. Well, I don't think that person would come to my event, but if that person had been in my event, I would have called him out on it. And I would have said from the very beginning, that has no place in a political discussion like the one we're trying to have here. And not only is it out of place and wrong, it is totally factually untrue. And to quit impugning the integrity of the president. Do I think it's... I think it's prejudiced. I think it's discriminatory. I think it comes out of the same unfortunate reservoir of hateful rhetoric.
I've got a prediction. First of all, I should say there was a nice, strong response by Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
God bless. Now, Fox News will turn around, start the countdown, 2 days max is my guess, certainly by Monday. And they'll, if there's a Black Lives Matter protester or even a questioner at any kind of Democratic event, and the candidates don't shout them down, Fox News will say, well, they said Trump didn't say anything about the Muslim guy complaining about the Muslims. Why didn't Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders say something about the hateful Black Lives Matter guys? Well, let's call it even. Right? But in reality, of course, Black Lives Matter says, please stop killing us.
Yes.
Yeah, they say don't kill us, not who can we go kill and when can we kill them. I also want to give Bernie Sanders credit. He tweeted, this nonsense has got to end. And he also tweeted, let's stop the racism, let's stop the xenophobia. And so I think he deserves credit for that.
And also,
no one's surprised to see that from Bernie Sanders.
Of course. Lindsey Graham also called out Trump on it. Now, Lindsey Graham hates Trump, and Lindsey Graham is best friends with John McCain, who had the original McCain moment.
That's true.
So it's also not that surprising. But he had a good quote. He says, it's a test of what kind of person you are.
Yeah.
And so credit to the Republicans and the Democrats that have come out strongly against those comments.
Just wish there were more.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Christie believes in the traditional fear-mongering.
Yes.
About 9/11 and et cetera, not on issues of race or religion.
Potheads.
Potheads and medical marijuana. And,
That's right. So he's a traditional Republican.
Yes.
Yeah, he wouldn't close down the border. He just closed down a bridge.